Free Guy is an interesting animal that is both funny and thought-provoking, despite being a mixed bag at times. Stick around and I'll explain. I'm Paeter Franson from ChristianGeekCentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of Free Guy. The synopsis on IMDb reads, a bank teller discovers that he's actually an NPC inside a brutal open-world video game. That's all that it says. It could say a little bit more. It actually has two stories to it. You've got Guy, played by Ryan Reynolds, the NPC in this open-world online video game, discovering who he is and trying to experience the freedom and love that he wants to have in life. And then you've got Millie and Keys, two game developers in the real world who are trying to prove that the world Guy lives in is based on code stolen from them. It actually feels a little bit like they borrowed plot elements from the original Tron movie and then maybe some philosophy from Tron Legacy. Most of the movie does take place in the game world and is going for action comedy, so there's lots of both of those elements, but it does have a few touching and romantic moments as well. The nature of the comedy is largely fish out of water, which is probably my favorite comedy flavor as opposed to like wisecracking types of humor, and the action is plentiful and often spectacular. Video games are in some ways represented accurately, I think, but in other ways the game world is fantastical future tech that gamers would say like, whoa, you can't do that in video games. That's not how video games work, stuff like that. In general, the nuts and bolts of the world have logical inconsistencies, but when I accepted that and treated it like a fantasy rather than science fiction, it definitely worked better for me. It does fall apart for me some the more they try to establish Guy as a living being with the same value as human beings in the real world. I would rather they approached it like, just let me invest in him as just kind of a metaphor for humans. Don't actually put into the script, he's a real boy, that kind of thing. That doesn't work for me because for that to be the case, we have to believe that artificial intelligence could be just as human, just as much of a person as humans, and that totally discounts the non-physical component that is essential to humans, according at least to biblical teaching. They don't go fully in that direction, but he is referred to as alive multiple times, and Millie becomes motivated to save the game world significantly because she values him as a person. This perspective on AI in the movie that the movie repeatedly affirms seems at odds with where the movie ultimately goes, namely to a place of valuing life in the real world more than quote-unquote life spent in video games. But I was grateful that, even though that was an inconsistent treatment of the topic, I was grateful they backed off of valuing AI as much as they were for a while in the middle of the movie, because it ultimately made the movie not just more philosophically satisfying, but even more noticeably to me, dramatically more satisfying. As far as the cast goes, I don't often connect with Ryan Reynolds' humor because he usually plays smart-mouth characters, and that's a humor I find annoying much more than funny. But here he plays this innocent, lovable, naive, fish-out-of-water character that I found both endearing and funny. Taika Waititi plays the corrupt studio head that stole Millie and Key's code. If you think he's funny in other movies, you may find him funny here. I don't, so I didn't. And I don't really have more to say on that. The rest of the cast all felt fine to me, with Jodie Comer and Joe Keery providing nice tethers as Millie and Keys to reality, to real human beings that helped me invest in the story. As far as stunts and visuals go, way more effects and of a higher quality than I've ever seen, even in an action comedy. They often don't look realistic or need to because they are mimicking video game staples like menus and HUDs and other effects. But even the elements meant to look realistic, like some car chases and stuff like that, came across pretty well to me, despite my eyes being cursed to pick out CGI very often. And many visual effects are also funny gags that gamers and geeks in general, I think, will get a real kick out of. I certainly did. As far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? It's hard to figure out what themes the story may be going for. It may be going for less than I assume, actually, but at the very least, it seems to be written from a particular perspective, from a particular worldview, with particular values and beliefs. But the inconsistency of some elements mutes the potential clarity of those values and worldview coming out from where they sit in the writer's room. The movie seems to say that there should be less violence in video games. At one point, because people are enjoying watching this AI character. But what do they call him? Like blue? Well, his name is Guy, but they refer to him as like blue shirt guy or something like that. Like streamers and stuff, and they get streamers from the real world to come in and play themselves here and make comments like, "Boy, this is really making me think that about how I interact with NPCs, and maybe I shouldn't just indiscriminately kill them and stuff." So it seems to want players to think about what they're doing in video games, and maybe like not be as violent when it comes to their treatment of NPCs. It seems to believe that AI creations could potentially have the same worth as humans, and yet it also sees lots of humor clearly in video game violence, and affirms that human relationships are more important than artificial ones found in video games. Like many Hollywood movies, it seems to value feeling over truth as a guiding compass for life and meaning in particular, and also appeals to our common desire to live full, pleasurable, and meaningful lives. Now, there's some good and bad in that perspective on life. Jesus came so that we could have life to the fullest. But in this broken world as it is right now, often our highest and fullest purpose in life involves monotony, involves a distinct lack of pleasure, involves willingly engaging in grindy elements of life. So thematically, it's an inconsistent and mixed bag, but for the most part, it's just having fun and not seriously trying to persuade. And as I said earlier, it ends on a note of giving high value to human relationships, so it did leave ultimately a good taste in my mouth. Now, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Paeter, this is worth renting for sure, maybe even owning. It's going to scratch your geek itch for imaginative action. It's surprisingly will make you laugh multiple times, which not many comedies actually do. And it's going to celebrate video games and remind you of why you love crazy open world video games and just the weird experiences that you can have with AI and, running people over and, all that kind of stuff in open world city games, Far Cry games, Ubisoft games, that kind of thing. And it's even going to tug on your heartstrings before all is said and done. In fact, this one might be something that your wife and your boys will probably enjoy, I think. So if you don't rent it soon, put it on your Christmas list. You'll want to watch this with them at some point. It's rated PG-13 for strong fantasy violence throughout, language, and crude/suggestive references. And those are all my thoughts for now on Free Guy. I would love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to, as always, thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. For info about the benefits of being an insider, go to patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Then I hope you'll check out our podcast and stay connected with all Christian Geek Central content at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.